Star Trek, the ultimate franchise. These are the voyages of 3 veteran Trekkies, Rich, Ian, and Toby. Their ongoing mission? To explore the vast Star Trek universe, to seek out new perspectives and fresh debates, to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. Beyond the Final Frontier.
Hello and welcome to Beyond the Final Frontier, a Star Trek podcast. I'm your host, Rich Matthews, and as ever, I am here with my fellow space travellers, Mr. Ian Spelling.
Hello, everybody.
And Mr. Toby Weidman.
Hello.
Now, this episode, we've got a treat. Revered Star Trek expert, Dr. Trek himself, no less, author of the first non-fiction Star Trek book I ever purchased, the Star Trek The Next Generation companion, Mr. Larry Nemecek.
Wow, guys, after that build-up, I want to meet me. No, thanks for, this is fun. Yes, no, thanks. Congratulations on the show, on the podcast, and glad it's gotten launched well, and thanks for asking me what might be fun to talk about that never gets talked about, and we'll have some fun today. Yeah.
But before we get into our theme today, the question we're asking everybody, and obviously for you this is a big question, as it is for 3 of us, is what was your first personal experience of Star Trek?
This is my 9th grade science teacher, me stumbling into a little joke going on with 2 other students late in the year, and the bottom line being they were doing a Star Trek thing and I didn't get it. And finally she just looked at me and said, "Oh, Larry, don't tell me you don't know Star Trek." And I was like, "It's the show with the guy with the ears, right?" Because it was after school reruns was that time. Yeah. So she was like, "You go home today and watch Star Trek." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I knew that the cartoon was still on NBC. This is dating it in the morning. So I said, some convoluted logic. I said, okay, I'm going to watch the cartoon, and if I like the cartoon, then I'll watch it. Why my brain had to go through this, I don't know. But I did, and within 2 or 3 weeks, I was hooked and buying The Making of by Steve Whitfield and Stephen Poe, and then the tech manual and the blueprints and everything when it came out. In those early crazy days when everything was so precious, besides just you sitting there watching after school every day, and as you watch the 2nd and 3rd and 4th time, you go, and last thing I remember when the tech manual came out, I remember going in and 2 of my buddies' 4th hour geometry, and I remember opening the page and going, "See, I told you, the symbols on the patches do match the shirt color."
From that point on,
it was lost cause. Yeah.
Excellent.
You were involved.
Well, that's awesome.
In a convention early on, right?
I was a kid. I was stuck in the Midwest, right? So New York and LA were far away from me. I could only dream of ever going to a con. But when you say involved, I joined a club when I was a local club when I was a senior.
Yeah.
And then I started a club in college, and we did a mini con a couple of years. And then I worked with the Oklahoma City bunch to do a con in early years. And the 2nd year we had Jimmy Doohan right about the time he had his heart attack. And the fan factions were going full blast, and the anti-us faction was saying, "Jimmy had a heart attack, he's gonna have to cancel." And we're like, no, he's coming. So, okay, yeah.
So how far does professionally date back for you in terms of Star Trek?
Not counting the times when I would do an interview for my paper and realize I could deduct it. It was selling the companion.
Oh.
In
and
92.
That was what year?
91.
91.
And then working on it in 92 for all of 3 months and then 6 months. Yeah.
Very cool.
Excellent. Yeah, brilliant.
Which is when I first, Brett, the time you were first syndicating your column, and I wrote you then. I remember.
Yeah.
If not, wait, not in 92. It was in 94, I think. when I was in LA for 3 months and actually doing it upright.
Probably. I mean, the column started in '93 with the premiere of Deep Space Nine.
I saw it, and then I called you. I think it was faster than writing. That's all we had those days, kids. You could either call or you could write a letter.
Right? You could call the operator and ask for a number back then.
Yes. Well, student days, you were even student. Forget that. Even being at home, you would call. You'd call long distance, and you wouldn't call before 8 and after 10 or 11 to get the long
to get the discounted rate. Yes.
Yep.
Call collect. That's what I
All
say.
the times I was working with Jeff Mandel back then for the star maps that didn't happen for me, and I was in Oklahoma and he was in New York, and we never talked on the phone because we were college students, and couldn't afford long distance.
Crazy. I'll just text you now, shall I, while we're talking across the ocean. The theme of today's episode is a really exciting one, actually, and an unusual one, in the sense that it's not something I think I've heard anybody talk about in a podcast format before. Because what we're going to talk about are Star Trek saviors, figures within the Star Trek history and pantheon who you could say at some point have saved or salvaged Star Trek or bring it into being, in inverted commas, indeed. Bunny ears, as Larry just did on screen. And we're going to do 5. We're going to rank them as we tend to do, but I imagine we could make cases for any of them being the primary savior, especially the top few. But it's going to be very interesting, and I'm quite excited to hear what people are singling out, whether we've all got the same people, or whether there's some variations of things we didn't occur on. So, with that in mind, Larry, as it was your theme that you proposed for this episode, what?
It's my fault.
It's your fault, of course.
No, we love the idea. Joking aside, great idea.
Who is your first savior? Your number 5?
Well, making it all mathematical gets problematical. But I'm going to say, because the biggest thing I think in all this is it's time and place and define savior. But I'm going to start with, and the reason I came up with this was because over the years, something would happen and you'd have some awareness. Either I inherited fandom coming to it at a point or lived through it. And it's kind of like, oh my gosh, you'd say, he's the man that saved Star Trek. Well, now wait a minute, what about X? Or no, wait a minute, so it's okay. We haven't had just one person maybe, but it depends on the timing. So anyway, I'm going to say my number 5. I'm going to start with, at a pivotal time, Harv Bennett.
Excellent.
Only because coming out of not the flop, but that the motion picture was at the time, but it was. Here's another phrase: a pivotal time in the franchise history, and that was a pivotal time. Was it going to actually, after 10 years of, I tell people half the reason for fandom in the beginning was just to get the show back, right? Celebrate it, enjoy your passion, but also there was a mission in a very activist decade, right? The 70s, so 60s, 70s. So just getting it back. And so after the motion picture, it was not a flop at all, but was there any oomph there to...
Well, they needed some profit, didn't they? Some better profit.
Well, yeah,
margin.
the profits,
for people who don't... For people who don't know, Larry, who is Harv Bennett?
Sorry, Harv Bennett was the producer that Charlie Bloodhorn hired after the motion picture did its thing, which made money, satisfied that 10 years of fan passion, wanting to come back, proved that it could be done, but left everybody hanging with the process. They weren't happy with, whether it was partly inherent and partly the setup that he'd been handed, but making the motion picture, bringing that home. And Gene Roddenberry is an executive producer, and just the way the production had gone. A lot that wasn't his fault was all the debt, all the 70s, the 2 attempts at a movie, all the costs they wound up writing off to the motion picture, which wasn't fair. But at the same time, there was a pretty fair amount of chaos on the bridge before that was a thing.
And he oversaw probably the most cohesive period, especially in movies, when you talk about 2, 3, and 4, especially, with 5 as his final entry and on-screen appearance.
Well, just going at it from the simplicity of an elevated veteran TV producer when they were trying to pull the budget, whatever the second Star Trek movie would be, they were going to do it with the TV division of Paramount, which is insane because it immediately.
It was like Psycho with Hitchcock and Psycho, interestingly.
Yeah. And then not just, well, he's the producer, so his story instinct, but also, and his own, because he didn't know Star Trek, and he famously asked fandom, especially the Terry Meyer and the Interstat readers, what he should do, and they said, go, watch, and he sat down and watched all 70 or 80 hours and came up with, oh my God, he was intrigued by Khan and Space Seed's, finale, and so good on him for coming into Star Trek not knowing anything, and overcoming that, and then the decisions he made along the way, including who he wound up hiring for his director. But
hiring Nick Meyer cannot be underestimated, can it?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then being with the ship for the next 4 movies, and then sadly thinking he had a claim, and then, being shown his way or the highway, and feeling like, my God, I've given you all my blood, sweat, and tears here for these movies, and saved this franchise and put it on a footing, and led the way to a new series and a comeback on TV and all the things. And then they didn't take his movie idea at the end, which famously was Starfleet Academy. And then he's
it's funny how it works.
Yeah, funny how that works. So anyway, that's my number 5. Yeah, for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Just lost it. I got him on the last camera interview he did was for the Con of Wrath, which is finally coming to fruition next year for my documentary about a crazy convention event in 1982. But his wife said this is going to be his last, and he was great. And then he passed about 4 years later.
Yeah.
So what was that? Around
2015 he passed.
Yeah.
It's 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so before I get into my 5, I'm going to throw out names that are not on my list, any one of which could be 6 or beyond. So Michael Piller is not on my list. Jerry Taylor, Manny Cotto was my actual number 6. Ira Bear, Bill Tice, Herb Solo, Bob Justman. So to your point, Larry, this is all about people who made a difference in the franchise or helped, quote unquote, save it. But for people who actually came in, stepped in and saved or changed the future of the franchise, that's what I went with. But there's Bob Wise. He got Nimoy on board for the motion picture. Say what you will about the motion picture. Nimoy and Star Trek are part and parcel. It was he who got him in. Wah Chang, Mike Westmore, Matt Jeffries, and of course Bob Justman. Justman was my number 7. But my number 5 is Rick Berman. And I know that might be a controversial choice for some people. I'm not sure, and I use this phrase a lot, that we'd be talking about Star Trek right now if it were not for the Berman era of Star Trek. The shows and the movies that he did are among the most beloved by fans. Trust me, I know fans have their issues with the way he ran the franchise, with what he did or didn't do in terms of protecting the Roddenberry legacy and what the franchise, quote unquote, stood for or was about. But let's acknowledge some of the other things he did. He hired Jonathan Frakes to direct The Next Gen and then the movies that Frakes did. He, very importantly, was the one voice who really did not want Geneviève Bujold to be Janeway in Voyager. And in a surprise to me always, acknowledged that at the time, right after it happened and Kate was brought on board to be Janeway. That was huge right there for the franchise because Kate was his first. Actually, I'm not even sure Kate was. I think Susan Gibney was actually his first choice. But if I'm not mistaken, bringing in Kate was landmark change and an important bit of history for the show, right? And for the franchise. So, again, I know he gets overlooked. I know that people hated the end of Enterprise and in many cases blame him directly for it. It was supposed to be a love letter to the 18 years under him, all of that. But those 18 years are nothing to sneeze at. And we will be mentioning a lot of the work that Berman oversaw in the course of our conversations on this podcast and possibly even today. So number 5 is Rick Berman for me.
Wow, interesting. I feel like Larry's sitting on some comments.
I think. Well, you're right. I feel like we're saying it with this title and put names to this title, Savior.
Yes.
I feel like Rick's biggest gift was. It feels like over the years, as the time has gone on, everything you said is totally true, Ian. But I feel like in my head, this savior of the franchise was like not like 1 second, but like a time period in time. And I feel like Rick's biggest gift was like the long haul.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always thought that the hardest thing he had to inherit, he took, Gene passes the baton, basically don't F up Star Trek and keep it going. And he does more than that. And all the eddies and pulls that there are being the showrunner for Star Trek through all the changes in culture and TV and all of that. And he holds it steady. But at the end, I feel like, the era and the culture's changing a little bit. TV's changing a little bit. And not that Rick was a dinosaur. I don't mean that. But I feel like sometimes the things that he helped do to preserve Star Trek over those years when it was in such danger of getting off track, or whatever the whim of the moment might be, to pull it one way or the other, in the end, he might have needed to let up on the reins just a little bit more faster, and maybe a few things that happened differently. But for the long haul, I don't know if anyone else had been in that chair besides Rick, if we'd have a Star Trek.
Right, and he is and was the first to acknowledge that it's possible he stayed on too long.
Yeah.
He acknowledges that, but he also acknowledges, why would he leave? He was running this fabulous franchise, both as a lover of Star Trek and a businessman and a creative and all of it. Hello, I'm running the show. Why would I leave?
And produce 4 movies.
Yeah. So I put him at 5 because credit where credit is due, and it belongs to Rick Berman.
Excellent. Well, my number 5 is a name I've never heard said, so I'm guaranteed to say it wrong.
This is going to be wild today already, I can tell.
While you're talking to someone that for ages said Hermione when reading Harry Potter instead of Hermione.
Hermione. It's not Hermione?
Yeah, I know, it's Hermione, isn't it? I wasn't proud of that.
I used to think that's how it was said as well, Rich. It's obviously maybe.
Oh, wow! I feel so seen!
It's an English way of saying Hermione.
I never had to say it out loud, and my brain would just kind of skip over her name because I was
Yeah, exactly. So I may well get this wrong, but I'll try. So my number 5 is Lucy Salhani, who was the Paramount domestic TV president at the moment when all the networks passed on the Next Generation, and it was her idea or the pitch to her colleagues and to the Prudential production team to go straight to syndication. And she assured everyone that she could sell a full season of 26 episodes direct to the networks, to syndication, not to the networks, to the syndication. So, and during her, I think she was at Paramount for about 6 or 7 years, I'm not sure exactly, but that decision was the reason that Next Gen did get on air in the end, and one of the reasons it was the most profitable syndicate programs in American broadcast TV history. So while it's not somebody who I think is a high profile, I think it's absolutely clear to me that the very thing you just mentioned in the Berman's tenure, that 18 years long haul, wouldn't happen. And it's very easy to often to vilify or to knock executives, because often they make stupid decisions. That was a very smart, savvy, unusual, and ultimately is the reason we have the Star Trek we do today.
I never say this, but I agree with you totally.
Well, thank you. I feel seen twice.
Don't get used to it, Rich. Come on.
I won't.
And it's only been the last few years that's come to pass with some of the latter day documentaries and things. At the time, it's almost like sometimes, I always think it's in terms of the controversies, but it's almost like there's this 20-year statute of limitations with Star Trek.
Yeah.
It takes a while for things to come out and people to, move on. But that's like a bonus, a plus, and I'm glad to see that's been stood up. She hasn't gone around to toot her own horn, but authors and historians and documentarians are seeking her out and getting her on camera.
Yeah, and it's exactly that when you're talking about this kind of topic and you're sort of thinking about who it could be, you suddenly go, hang on, especially because it's a non-creative in inverted commas. That was like, yeah, no, that's, you zero in, that's a big moment, and Star Trek in general owes Lucy Sahani a debt for sure. So Tobes.
Yeah, my number 5 is J.J. Abrams. Whatever you think of the Kelvin Universe films, they were just massive box office hits, especially the first 2. Their opening weekends were all really quite impressive. And Star Trek, after the franchise fatigue, and I'm putting that in bunny ears as well, Star Trek had been in the doldrums, and Abrams came in and he revitalized the franchise, and I think he shed a lot of the moral and ethical quandaries that Star Trek had been known for, and pushed forward with a kind of a more special effects, action, quippy, humor laden style. But I think he got people excited about Star Trek again, and inevitably gave Star Trek a new audience and a new generation of fans. And the reason why we have Discovery and Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks and Prodigy is a legacy from the J.J. Abrams films. So that's why he's my pick.
Yeah, sadly I have to agree with that.
I mean, it's as you know, I'm not a huge fan of those films. I think I describe them as great science fiction action films, but not great Star Trek films. But lots of people disagree with me, and lots of people love them. So
No, and my children are good examples. And when already a lot, I've recently stepped up my engagement with lots of fan forums from my PhD and also the podcast, and that question comes up a lot. What if I was to show somebody new to Star Trek, what's the first thing you would show them? And if they're young, you go Star Trek 2009, because it's got an energy to it, which you could argue, just to refer to allow Ian to get on his favourite hobby horse, something like the motion picture doesn't do. You know my feeling. I worship at the altar.
You know my feeling as well.
Although I think the motion picture does better. Now that the motion picture is finally what the motion picture should have been all along, it can defend itself a little better than it could.
We're on the same page with you on that, Larry.
Oh, really? You see, Ian's been very nice to you now, Larry. I'd like to point it out. He makes hand gestures whenever I talk about the motion picture normally. So, no, we are all agreed.
Well, we had so many decades of doing that, but...
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Back to... Listen, how do we start talking about JJ? We're over on the motion picture. This is great.
No, because it's all about introductions, reintroductions.
But it is interesting that the JJ movies are criticized for being too fast, and the motion picture is criticized for being too slow.
The motionless picture, yeah.
Well,
motionless picture, yeah.
The slow motion picture is the one I always say. Yeah.
I love the moment on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart when J.J. Abrams basically says he was always a bigger Star Wars fan than Star Trek because he didn't get it and thought it was too intellectual.
Yeah.
The one thing I will give J.J. and all the modern series we've had were going to happen eventually. I don't know that I credit J.J. Abrams from... Well, you said the thing you're going to show young fans, new fans. I'm just thinking, I guess that first Boimler Mariner scene where she's drunk might be a reach too far on Lower Decks to show somebody for their first taste of Star Trek. But the one thing that I think JJ did that shook things up was the silly conventional wisdom with the bean counters and the suits was, Star Trek was dead in 2005, and it'll take it 10, 15, 20 years to come back, and JJ did shock everyone. He did a movie deal, and then within his movie deal said, I want to do a Star Trek. It wasn't like they went out and hired him like Harv Bennett was hired to do a Star Trek movie. And the one thing he did was shake people up and go, what? You want to try this tired old horse already? Which was kind of the conventional, and did jazz things up. And yeah, we can all disagree on how and when it was done, but the casting and just pushing it back into the limelight and trying again.
I think you just put it in front of people, that's the thing. Right. It was back on screens, and people went to see it.
And let people rediscover or discover for the first time what came before it.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So, Larry, you're number 4.
Okay. Well, since this discussion, because I entered this not realizing I needed 5 up front now, but this whole discussion has led me to because in my head, I'm going to say this, I didn't think about it. In my head, I basically was thinking writers and showrunners, and Harv Bennett was going to be my outlier. But Harv is like in the mainstream here. So I'm going to say number 4, and maybe I would go back and invert these now, but I'm going to say number 4 was Dick Block.
Interesting.
Who was the buyer at the Kaiser stations. They had 5 TV stations. He was the syndicated buyer when syndication was new, when syndication was talk shows and game shows. Maybe, I don't know if there were any syndicated soap, but daytime was, TV, was quiz shows and soap operas and that kind of, and second run shows. And, I Love Lucy invented this, but local stations wanted to fill up their off hours with programming, and maybe it was old sitcoms. But Dick Block is the guy in the second season, not third season in cancellation, but in the original series second season, who saw Star Trek and thought, oh my God, they are so misapplying this. They are so missing the boat on this. Because he instantly thought he got the audience demo before demos were a thing, obviously. And he said, this will be perfect for my independent stations that don't have local news at the news hour or even, late at night or on the weekends. And he approached Paramount with Desilu. Well, it was Paramount barely. He came to Desilu, to Paramount and said, okay, let's talk syndication package to local stations. I have 5 stations. And they're like, wait, what? I mean, they weren't even set up and ready to talk about it yet. And he's the one that had the foresight and had a deal set up so that when the third season did go down, his 5 stations, all right, Cleveland and New York, anyway, they were the Kaiser stations that at the time that Kaiser owned, which was Kaiser Aluminum. But they got into media, and he was responsible for buying and bought them and put them on their stations. And those 5 stations' ratings, the fall after the cancellation, the fall of '69, were like 200%, 300%, 400% better than they were the year before. And they loved that. And the moment that got out to the trades, and the moment that got out to the broadcaster conventions when they're selling the distributors are selling shows, new and old, that became people said, yeah, I want what he's got. I want to do that. The minute that got, so this whole thing we talk about, the syndicated stories took off, the stations took off, the ratings took off in syndication. The dead little show was way more popular after it died than it was while it was on network primetime. The guy responsible for that was Dick Block.
That's fascinating.
It's not a name I know.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's the thing is...
So we're going to go there. I'll throw him in the ring. And he died we got him, I had him on Portal 47 and we had him on the Trek Files once or twice, and he just passed in the last couple of years.
Wow.
So he was around to actually be able to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing, because especially...
It was amazing.
It is worth acknowledging people like him and Lucy in the sense that the business has always played a role. And because the algorithmic nature of the current media landscape is often discussed and is very much visible, even though we're all victim to it, and even if we rail against it, it's worth remembering that was always key. And Star Trek goes hand in hand with that sort of neoliberal capitalist America, the exceptional America that Roddenberry emerged from.
Yeah. Well, look where we are right now. This is, once again, the tech and the culture and the industry are going to shape what Star Trek is now, right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And next.
And that's what I meant, now and next.
Yeah.
To me, now is next, because it's like, okay, well, this, I'll enjoy this next couple of years, but my mind's already on what's coming and what it'll look like. And where it'll be.
Yeah. So, Ian, you're number 4.
My number 4 is Harv Bennett. If you really need somebody who saved the day when the day needed saving, it was Harv. No question about it. It was interesting to me because, Larry, I think you're aware of this. My uncle was good friends and played tennis on a regular basis. Harv was his tennis partner.
They had mentioned that ages ago, but it's always good to hear that. Yeah. Okay.
They were friends and socialized, and Harv hired my uncle to direct my favorite episode of my second favorite show of all time, which was The $6 Million Man. He did the Christmas episode of Bionic Christmas Carol. And it was There's a bunch of Star Trek actors in it, Antoinette Bauer being one of them. And the family house is the Psycho house because the show was filmed on the Universal lot. But anyway, again, I say this every time. We might not have Star Trek that we have now were it not for the work that Harve Bennett did. The thing I want to point out about Harve Bennett that a lot of people seem to either not mention or take for granted is the writing that he did for Star Trek. We all think of him as the producer.
He wrote Search for Spock?
He wrote Search for Spock. He was among those developing the story for 2, and he was involved in 4 and 5. So he's high up on my list for a reason. I think some of the best Star Trek was produced during his run as the leader of the franchise. I think he did a wonderful job of balancing what Star Trek needed at the time with what Roddenberry's Star Trek stood for. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for any conversations between Harve and Roddenberry, to be honest with you. But, it's funny. You know me, guys, Larry, you're not aware of this. I tend to bundle people together with like a tie. And the guys, pick on me for it. But I have Harve Bennett next to Nick Meyer on this. It was which of those two?
So, Ian, to defend you, Ian, I also have in my 4th spot Harve Bennett and Nicholas Meyer as a duo.
There you go. As a tandem.
Well, I'm in the same dilemma. I hate separating them because not one led to the other, but.
It is a dilemma.
No, it's a dilemma. It is, because without Harve, you don't have.
But if I had to pick one of the two gentlemen, it would be Harve, just because he was with the franchise longer. He's the one who hired Nick Meyer.
Exactly.
If we're calling a spade. So, Mr. Bennett deserves all the credit in the world for Star Trek of that era being what it was and being as good as it was.
I completely agree about not separating them. All I'd say is I've deliberately tried, because I'm very film focused, to not go directors, actors as much as possible, because it's like that's where my mind automatically went.
I don't have any actors on my list.
I don't think of actors at all. No, for this category.
I picked those two together because I'm specifically thinking of the period between Motion Picture and Wrath of Khan, and how they changed basically the direction that they went with that. And we've mentioned this.
I knew I liked you, Toby.
We mentioned this in a previous episode of when we were talking about the movies, but the fact that they cut the budget, it was made for relatively little, and it was brought in on schedule as well, which is something that studios love.
Especially given that Meyer had made Shatner do all those takes just to wear him down and reduce the size of his performance. That's quite remarkable.
Well, if we don't talk about Harve again, I just want to throw this out too, because
we will be talking about Harve again.
Okay. Well, the other thing that people forget, which is amazing the first time I heard the story, was the awkwardness when Gene was basically demoted after the motion picture and Harve brought in to produce Trek movies, was the fact that they had a prior history. And when Gene famously had his boom year in 1965 and he had his half-hour drama police story at the same time he was doing The Cage, and also I think it was a half-hour saga western, anthology western ongoing, called The Long Hunt of April Savage, with Robert Lansing, Gary Seven, 12 O'Clock High. But Robert Lansing it was about a guy whose family had been wiped out, and he was on a hunt to find out who his family's killers were. So it was kind of like the hunt. It's Route 66 or it's The Fugitive kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And
Kung Fu,
yeah. And so it's that show, but they're doing the pilot. They're out on location in the boonies, and it's for ABC, and ABC hates Robert Lansing for the part. And Gene loved Robert Lansing, and they kept telling him recast it, and they're shooting it on location, and they're finally getting fed up because Gene just stops answering the phone, and they're out in the boonies, and he's ignoring them. And finally, and this is ABC in New York, and they put their most junior executive on a plane and say, go out there and pull the plug on it. And guess who that junior executive was that went out and...
Poor Harv.
Yeah. So years before we get to that moment in the early 80s, 15 years earlier, plus, Harv had been the one to fire Gene and shut down the pilot.
God, it's a small world, even in Hollywood, isn't it?
Fly on the wall. That's what I was referring to, Larry. It's interesting. Yep.
So my number 4 is Michael Piller, because I accept even my own number 5 in terms of an executive and the Rick Berman argument. I was watching Next Gen. It started when we got it a bit late here. We got it on TV. I mean, you could go and rent it on video, but we got it in like end of '89 when it started. But the first name on Star Trek as a TV series that I became aware of in terms of quality, in terms of it representing something, was Piller. There was something when I started to feel that I really started to like Star Trek in season 3, and the changing of the writers and what was coming in, and before I was even aware at that point about Roddenberry and his status and what was going on and the handover to Berman, any of that, the quality of the shows on screen started to coincide with Michael's name. And when you then sort of look back with a little bit more knowledge, and you hear about the open script submission policy, the bringing on the people like Ron D. Moore, people like that, coming in through and being mentored by Michael and being brought forward. And then his involvement in co-creating Deep Space Nine and Voyager and making it more about the people than about the sci-fi idea alone. Star Trek needs a big sci-fi idea. I will die on that hill. And often what I have a problem with some modern Star Trek is they forget that. But he made that show as interesting a human show as it was a sci-fi show. And without him, I think it's Will Wheaton's gone on the record of saying he's as responsible as anyone for it becoming as good as it was. It was always decent Star Trek, but it became just flat out great TV thanks to Michael Piller. No dissenting views? Everyone's nodding
No.
their statements.
Yeah.
And sad that he was taken before his time.
Yeah.
It would have been interesting to see post Enterprise in that 5-10. I don't know what would have happened, but I would have liked to have had Michael around for whatever the Star Trek world could have used him for, and whoever was calling shots, whoever had the keys.
Yeah. Like you said about Meyer, it's the same thing. I always think that right now when they brought it back, and you're talking about Lawrence Kasdan coming back for Force Awakens and sort of that parallel, I always kind of wished when it was brought back for streaming, when Fuller was brought on for Discovery and all of that tumult that followed, God, if only that had been Michael Piller.
Well, Piller also did a really interesting show called Legend with Richard Dean Anderson and John Delancey. And it was a incredibly entertaining show that mixed kind of fantasy science fiction light with action, adventure, and comedy and romance. And it was such a good show. And I, to this day, remember UPN was on the fence about renewing it for a second season. The ratings weren't great, but for UPN, they weren't terrible. And it didn't. And I know Piller loved that show and was deeply frustrated that it didn't get renewed for a second season.
It got better
Very
as they
fun.
got into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did that make it over here, Rich? So I don't think I've seen it.
Yeah.
I know of it, never seen
It was, and John. What got me was Richard Dean Anderson got all the billing, and John Delancey was there, and it was UPN. So you're thinking they should market to the Trek audience. It's John Delancey, and it's almost like he was never mentioned in the promos, which I thought was a loss, and I didn't know if that was contractual or what. But I just thought that didn't do them any favors. But yeah, I felt really bad for Michael and everybody involved in it.
Yeah. So, Toes.
My number 3 is the Trimbles. You know, they started the original Star Trek campaign in 1970s.
I'd swear you said the Tribbles.
I did. So you
Are we
said the Tribbles
crediting the
as well.
Tribbles?
I
We're
was
saying
like- I was going to say, I love
Tribbles.
David Gerald. I wouldn't call him the savior of Star Trek.
No, the Tribbles saved David.
Yeah.
No.
They're a major reason why there was a third season, and okay, Star Trek got cancelled after that third season, but because of that they got the syndication, which then allowed the fans to sort of rally behind it, and you know, everything else that came on after that. I think they contributed massively. I think they are often hailed as being one of the saviors of Star Trek, aren't they? So I don't think I'm stepping too far out.
Well, what was it between 67 and what was it? Christmas.
It was after season 1.
Yeah, it was December, wasn't it? 67 and then March 68. There was
They tried again after season 2, and unfortunately we got season 3.
100,000 letters or something they got.
And the fact that how they had to do it, it's insane when you actually read. Like they were sort of printing it up, the newsletters and at
they were
home
bringing
and
dinners to their home and having potluck dinners, and yes, it's a great story.
But that's the way the world moved. That was stamps and paper days, and so it kickstarted really
and
big
fanzines and filk singing and all of it. Yeah.
But fair play to them. I mean, they didn't have to do it. It's just like something they felt really passionate
But think
about.
of also the time. It was 68 and 69. It was a very activist time, and young people and college kids and professionals too. It wasn't just kids, as Gene and other people have since tried to show. There were lots of doctors and lawyers and school teachers and people in government, all up and down the line. But it was the activist, young kids, and there was manipulation there a little bit. I mean, Gene was secretly funding them and all that. He never got onto it.
Yeah.
But see, that was the 60s and before social. Now, creators and showrunners come out and lead the band. My show's on the bubble. Let's all get out and it's a thing now. And people are out. People vomit all over social media to be honest and vulnerable and all that. And back in the day, you kept all your cards close to your vest. You didn't show any vulnerable, no cracks. And,
fan as activists, the Trimbles were the vanguard. Whether they were at all bankrolled by Gene, it's somewhat irrelevant because when I'm talking about fandom, and when you talk about the modern version
there had
of
to
fandom,
be once the money came in. Yeah,
exactly. It was birthed by Star Trek. Everything we think of in fandom and all the dynamics comes from this period, basically modelled. Although we have the social media vomit version now. It's a nice turn of phrase. But it is a version of this, which is the sense that the fan, the audience, had some say in this exchange.
The whole thing of fan ownership came right from here.
Yeah, back from the late 60s. And people think of it as a modern thing. And you want to go, no, that's not true. Anyone who's a fan of Star Trek knows that Star Trek exists now because of fans. And not like Star Wars, where the box office was always indisputable from the beginning, where that was, no matter what anyone said, there was always a money argument for Star Wars, always. Star Trek, it was never quite that simple at any point. And even now, they still sort of can't quite work out a way to keep it consistently making the kind of money they want it to, because it's a more complex beast.
And they were also important in terms of they wrote and published Concordance, right? And
which was my first guide.
Yeah, I think it's sort of everyone's first interactive, well, not interactive, but reference book when it comes to Star Trek. And now everyone goes to StarTrek.com or Memory Alpha, but I mean, back in those days, that those things didn't exist.
The whole Wikipedia idea for a franchise was John and Bicho as well, right? And her don't forget her convention organizing, especially in L.A. She was at the Cleveland Worldcon when organizing like the first costume contest, or it was more like a model display the year that Gene brought the shows to the Cleveland Tricon in '66 and showed the pilots, and they met then.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna very quickly mop up my 3 and 2 because we've already done them, which is mine. The Trimbles were my number 2 for that very reason in terms of the impact. My number 3 was Harve Bennett. All I'll add to Harve Bennett is when I heard he died, I emailed Star Trek Mag immediately and said, please can I write the obit? I've never done that for anyone else in any context, but it surprised me slightly. But when I heard that, I was like, I want to write, please. If I can ask to write one thing, I want to write that, because I felt so much, exactly as everyone has said, that my Star Trek, because I was not an original series guy, because I came on with the movies, and although I loved the motion picture and I did see it first, the movies which made me a Star Trek fan were his movies, his and Maya's work, 2, 3, and 4. and so I felt when I heard he'd gone. Yeah, I felt a profound sadness. Interestingly for me, slightly more than when Gene died. But I was younger when Gene passed, so it was a slightly different thing. So Larry, you're next up again.
Well, I've got one more that I want to mention later, but for 3, I'm going to say Nick here because I can separate them a little, he and Harv a little bit, only because, and where my head goes with all this is, all these people are a product of their time, and I said that phrase, pivotal moment, and it's after, it's like the butterfly effect here of breaking the prime directive or something. It's like, well, if that hadn't been the person, then what might have followed, and part of this is like how new, a lot of mine tend to go new or young Star Trek franchise, because as the franchise went along, it grew its own legs. And so the point to me at which, and like now, if JJ and if the modern Treks, if Alex Kurtzman hadn't come along, we might have had a longer wait, but I'm sure Star Trek would have come back in some way. And so some of these are about timing, or what, how long a wait did we have, or what was the quality of it when when happened. But back in the days when we were talking about twigs, not mighty trunks here, and saplings. And I'm going to have Nick as my number 3, and only Harv ahead of him, only because, yes, Harv is the one who hired Nick. Notable here that neither one of them knew Star Trek and had to go research it when they got hired. As much as
That's the miracle. That's the miracle.
That's a miracle too. But also that Nick, when he comes to, he's directing too, and they have the famous 5 different drafts, and they're all over the place. And he sits down and says, "Fine, we got to," he doesn't know about the deadline, like almost as bad, the famous motion picture deadline, but they had a distribution deadline for Wrath of Khan too, or Star Trek 2, they were going to be out a ton of money if they didn't get it to theaters by X day. So, but the fact that he jumped in, and this fact was hidden for 10, 15, 20 years, that he jumped in and wrote the screenplay from all those drafts just to get it done, and he says his agent almost killed him. But
because he didn't take credit, did he? He accepted it was fine.
Exactly, and didn't take credit. He's like, I just want to direct the movie. Let's get it, and this is what I got to do. Let's do it. Yeah. So that, and then he wasn't involved. They asked him for 3. He wasn't involved with 3. He's involved with 4. He directs 6. So as the movies went along, that became a lot more solid base, to the point now where Next Generation, the new return to TV, is the fragile new baby, and the movies are a thing until they're not. But that's where I will slot Nick in, because Harv came in and had all these attitudes and had all these intentions and goals, but it's amazing that he finds this young kid that didn't know anything about Star Trek to pull it off, and then he jumped in and went beyond himself to make it happen, and then did it.
Absolutely right. Ian.
So we are at number 3, correct?
Yes.
All right, 3 is where I'm putting Bijo and John Trimble. Realistically speaking, we could say who launched Star Trek, who did this, who did that, but we might not have had the 2nd or 3rd seasons of Star Trek without Bijo and John. You guys already pretty well addressed their importance to the franchise. I just want to throw out there that Bijo kind of became the face of the Trimbles in many ways. John was much more laid back as a human, as a man, as the husband in this very interesting couple. I got to spend a very good deal of time with them over the years. I was first introduced to Bijo when I started my Star Trek column in '93, and then I had never gotten to meet them until years later. When I was editor at StarTrek.com and we were dealing with the official conventions and all of that, I suggested to my bosses, including John Van Sitters at CBS Paramount at the time, that we bring them out to Comic-Con as part of the 50th anniversary celebration. They were part of the official creation convention for the 50th anniversary, where we surprised them and acknowledged their role in it equally, by the way, John and Bijo. Yeah. And it's a personal point of pride for me that the official world of Star Trek paid tribute to them after them not getting a lot of tribute for a good many years. And they were both wonderfully humble about it and grateful for it, and also frustrated that it took that long, if I'm being honest. But John was a wonderful, gentle, sweet soul. Bijo is piss and vinegar and equally sweet in her own way. And they balanced each other terrifically as a couple. They are dear, dear people. Obviously, John passed away a couple of years ago now. And Bijo still loves to hear from people. So, for the holidays coming up, if anybody, feel free. We'll put it up on our Facebook page, an address where anybody who wants to reach out to Bijo can do so. She would love to hear from our fans and from her fans. A wonderful, wonderful, wonderful woman.
How old were they when they started the campaign?
They were not young when they started it, which is, to your point, it wasn't just a young audience, Larry. They were somewhere in the middle. Were they in their 30s at the time?
I was thinking late 20s, maybe. Because
Right.
John had been in the Air Force, I want to say in the 50s, young, so still in their 20s by 67, 68. So,
Because I believe Bijo has to be closing in on late 80s.
but definitely
maybe even
movers and
90s.
shakers in, like, she was at Worldcon organizing the first costume call masquerade. So,
Yes. Wow. Bijo is 92.
Wow, there we go.
All right. So if we're looking back, 67, we're talking, right? So she's 92. Do some quick math with me. 34. She was mid-30s when she helped save the show.
Point to speak to is that it was already a multi-generational audience, even then. And then you had to mobilize it, which was quite a profound thing to do. And let's also remember that being 34 in 1967, 68, is not like being 34 now in this sort of preserved state of juvenilia we all live in, increasingly.
that's
So
a nice, I like that phrase.
So 34.
John was younger.
Oh, really? Oh,
Okay.
interesting.
Okay.
He
Yeah.
was born in 39.
But a 34-year-old in 67 was an adult.
Correct.
Yeah, so, yeah, absolutely. So we've already done your number 3, haven't we, Tobe?
Yes.
And my number 3 is Harv Bennett, so we'll come full circle to Larry for your number 2.
I'm gonna invert these two just because no one's mentioned this one, so I'm gonna save him for my number 1, and I'm gonna say Michael Piller here for number 2.
Really? That high? Wow.
Well, yeah, because look what happened next year. He kind of knew Star Trek, but he was almost as much of a
noob.
without the franchises as he wasn't a Ron Moore or a Renee Ashfria or Ira. He knew about it, but he knew about it as a historian. But Michael came in as this frustrated writer who'd been sabotaged by a college professor and wound up in the business. He was a journalist, local TV Emmys, wound up being a network suit. He was a censor, standards and practices, and then wound up writing, and he Simon & Simon and 2 or 3 other network shows before he got pulled into Star Trek. Not science fiction, but look at Next Generation. Yeah, it was in its second season, but it was the chaos on the bridge time. And whether it was, the turmoil of the first season and Leonard Majelish, Gene's attorney, and the early days, or Maury Hurley there and the staff, just a lot of dissatisfaction. And the actors were holding the show together, and the production side. It looked good. It was increasingly looking like a great show. The cast was doing great with what they got handed to do, but the core of the show was still so chaotic. And Michael came in chaos. I mean, he came in late to a season because Michael Wagner left, who was going to take the handoff from it. But that we talk about the open script submission policy, that was a desperation because he was riding the rims 6 weeks in and trying to wrangle the show and make it what we've all talked about now, more of the family show than the monster of the week or the planet of the week and the crisis of the week. Although that's a lot of Star Trek, but how do you rebalance that and get back to the family feel that the original series had? And they were getting there. Anyway, I am a steady hand and not the easiest guy to get along with. And a lot of the writing staff that had been there left, and even his friend Ira Bear was his. They were best friends, and they all left in the chaos. But out of all that, they wrangled something that ended up with Best of Both Worlds, and the last half of the season was better, and then ratings took off, and And yeah, Star Trek, here's my point. Star Trek might have been around, but it was just so wobbly and under as you know, we talk about 1 or 2 or 3 good shows from the first couple of seasons. Okay, Q-Who and Measure the Man and all of that.
Elementary Dear Data.
Yeah, so it was like it was like, you know, hit and miss. And it started crazy, but he solidified that. And the other, you know, and then everything builds, and they co-create DS9, and all those instincts are there. And the other thing that I just want to say about Michael, and thank God that this finally came to light, was he got so totally screwed with the legacy that Insurrection is, because his initial idea got poo-pooed. And if they'd stuck with that, it would have been a much different movie instead of just a really nice 2-episode the series put on a big screen. And his book kind of brings that out, a fade in. So anyway, I'm going to say Michael, only because here's a point where it's not so much the guy who saved Star Trek, but the guy who made Star Trek so much better than it would have, might have trundled along where it was had that input not come.
Cool.
So that's the way I look at Michael.
No, totally fair.
Yeah.
Ian,
Well,
number 2.
my number 2 falls into that realm. You know, I rattled off a list of names at the beginning of people who were not on my list. I should clarify that, like, number 2, I have D.C. Fontana, Gene Kuhn, J.J. Abrams, and Alex Kurtzman.
Well,
Right? Here we go.
No.
Here we go.
For the reason that they fall into the same category. Of those 4, I have to go with Gene Kuhn.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Okay.
But one, my entry point to Star Trek was Devil in the Dark. Kuhn wrote that episode. So I am forever grateful to him, and then, you know, what he did is brought me into it, and you can't top that in my view. But my understanding from talking to a lot of the people that we have mentioned in this conversation, by the way, including D.C. Fontana and Bob Justman and Harv Bennett, and Roddenberry at the time when I was in college, said to me, Gene Kuhn deserves a lot of the credit for making Star Trek what it is. So, Larry, that falls into, he's like my TOS Michael Piller in this instance, is the best way to put that.
Interesting.
I don't know that he helped create the Klingons, he helped create the Starfleet Command, he helped create so much of the world that's been built out from the original series over the years, that I think his contributions are incredibly important and stand the test of time as well. I mean, Starfleet Academy is going to have characters and creatures and species and ships and authorities and all of that this man created almost 60 years ago. So Kuhn is number 1 of 4 for number 2, as opposed to 7 of 9.
Yeah. Your ranking is a collective for sure.
Well, that's why I was so glad about Bijo and John Trimble, because hey, there's 2 of them, but there are a couple at least.
Toby, have we done your number 2? I can't remember. Sorry.
No, we haven't.
Okay. Go ahead, because mine is the Trimbles. So
my 2 and 1 are going right back to the beginnings, and my number 2, and it's roughly, and I'll see whether you accept this or not, but it's Desilu as the company. I think obviously Lucille Ball's company, her solo, obviously very, very important, but someone I wanted to single out is Oscar Katz, who was the executive VP of production. I had to look this up, by the way. April 1964 to March 1966. I couldn't just reel that off there, but the top of my head.
So no one would have known.
His dear friend Google.
Yeah,
Dr. Google.
But he was.
Which made it funny.
Yeah, I know, I heard it. I just chose to ignore it. I don't want to be known as Dr. Google, all right?
Dr. Google Eyes. We'll go with that.
Mr. Wiki man.
Yeah.
He did a lot of stuff that kind of was behind the scenes. So he was the one, when they were still chasing, after the Cage had been rejected, and they were still chasing Jeffrey Hunter to come back because the period had passed, and so they were trying to recontract. I think it was Katz who was basically the one who just went, "This has gone on too long. We need to recast." So, I mean, I think he is the sort of person who started that process of making people think, okay, we need a different lead. He also, from again what I understand, after they tested the second pilot, it was tested in they showed several things, and Star Trek was the last one in that list, and so it got rejected. And he was the one who went to NBC and basically forced them to retest it. He complained so much, and he demanded that they show Where No Man Has Gone Before at the start rather than at the end. And ultimately, we know it was picked up, and the series started. So I don't know whether you class it as a savior, but he is someone who fought for Star Trek. He was the guy who brought Roddenberry in to Desslu in the first place. And although he wasn't around for the whole of Star Trek's run, I do think he is someone who kind of gets forgotten in that whole aspect of the show.
Okay, brilliant. So, Larry, we come to your number one.
Okay. Well, I was sitting on this, and then Ian steals my fire to a degree. But I had him down in the mix. Again, there's ties and there are bundles and all of that. But again, going back to this thing of what was foundational, it's just hard to have somebody save Star Trek now because it's a thing and it's going to be around. But going back to those seminal days, I'm going to say Gene Coon for all the reasons that Ian mentioned. But remember, if you're talking about actually saving the series, getting it out of the gate in the beginning for there to be something for John and Bijo to come save in the beginning, Gene was the second one in this slot because it was John D.F. Black who was, in those days they didn't even have a staff of 6 or 7. It was the showrunner, and they may have had another writer, a staff writer, editor, but it was all freelance, right? And somebody had to edit and re-edit, and occasionally they got to do their own script. Hopefully they had to know the show, but and that's why even those days and having a tight budget, I don't have Dorothy on this list. If anything, I would bundle Dorothy with Gene, but it was Gene who was the one when John D.F. Black kind of had to start doing this and didn't do it as well. I'm not talking about quality of writing. I'm talking about being mini showrunner when that's not your job title. But it was Gene that basically kept the show going because Gene Roddenberry was tiring out and it was fatiguing. And this monster they had created was eating everybody up and consuming all the designers. And it was Gene Coon who was the fresh blood, that brought all the cool Star Trek ideas and fleshed it out. And to what you said, Rich, about the name you recognized when you started watching episode, it was Gene Coon was the first, followed right by Dorothy. When I'm that kid watching after school and going, oh, this is Gene Coon's on that. Oh, Gene Coon is on that one. Okay. And you start, it becomes a thing. And by the time I was watching Star Trek, Gene Coon had died. He missed all of this. He died of smoked like a chimney and died in 1973 and missed the whole hoopla return of Star Trek from the.
He was 49 when he died. He was a very young man.
It was crazy, and thank God we had people like Andrea Kindred who was his assistant and can speak up for him because that's one of my little missions has been giving Gene Coon his due. Since he missed all this and isn't there to speak for himself. But the Klingons and the Federation, they were stumbling around with a name even for the Federation and Starfleet, and they finally came up with that. But apart from all that he get, and things like the McCoy Spock, repartee, whatever you want to call it, all those the things that I look back at that he was responsible for. Oh, well, that's my favorite part of. And he had his big, late first season into the second when to me the show matured. It's like, oh, he's basically the reason why everything I like most about Star Trek is there, past the basics. So that's why I'm just going to say that, without Gene Coon, Gene Roddenberry's great idea might have, until it got to the point where even a writing campaign could save it, just getting out of the first season into the second.
Well, we now know that was the history, isn't it? That Gene's idea was the brilliant.
And Dorothy was like the icing on top of his icing.
And successively, each time Star Trek has returned, it's because somebody else has taken Gene's idea and carried it
right.
on.
But this was like at day one. And again, Dorothy was right there doing the same thing. But to me, it was Gene Kuhn standing on Gene's desk yelling at him to stay in there. When it wasn't Bob Justman doing that, it was Gene Kuhn doing that.
So, Ian, you're number one.
My number one is Lucille Ball / Desilu Productions. I think there's a lot of apocryphal storytelling when it comes to Lucille Ball. I would love to know the absolute truth. Did she know what Star Trek was going to be? Was she more aware of it with the second pilot? One source will tell you that she was totally on board with the second pilot and pushed hard for NBC to take it, even though Desilu had not had much success with NBC, since most of her success was back with CBS back in the day. There's a lot in there. If you look somewhere else, it says she did push NBC, but it was her company. By the way, we should also give her husband some credit as well. Desi Arnaz was co-owner of the
Soon
company.
to be ex-husband.
Yeah, but
Well, X is by then, but still,
well, involved in the company.
owner to a part, yeah.
Yeah, involved
Built
in the
it.
company. I don't know that he had really anything to do with Star Trek, but certainly it was a Desilu production, and there's no Desilu without the Desi part, right? So, at least in the name
Invented
of
the
the
rerun.
company. This is true. So, Lucille Ball, the bottom line, whether it's Lucille Ball or Desilu, there is no Star Trek without the company supporting the project. Roddenberry wrote it. It's not getting made without Desilu. All the other talent that we've mentioned, all the other names, it doesn't happen if somebody doesn't say yes to making the pilot.
Yes.
Whether it's the first pilot or the second pilot, we can all debate that. But bottom line, Desilu was... Are we being technical, though? Was it the savior? I guess the second pilot would be savior. First one is launching it out of the gate, and then you needed the savior to come in and greenlight the
Which is
second
why
pilot.
my number one is Lucille Ball. Partly because... Sorry,
I'm just going to say, it's why it wasn't my number one, and I chose to pick out Oscar Katz, is because I found so much conflicting stories about how much Lucille was involved in
not,
the
right.
finance. Yeah, exactly. So that's why I put Desilu in there. But
you see, that's I can't dispute that. But I also think you can't dispute, as Ian did say, without Lucille Ball. And yes, Desi.
oh no,
but
I'm not arguing. I'm not
Desi's
arguing
not
that point.
Yeah, Desi's not Desi without Lucy. So without Lucille Ball, there is no Star Trek.
Well, Lucy wanted some 1-hour dramas to go along with all the sitcoms they either produced or housed.
Yeah.
And she wanted her 1 or 2 1-hour dramas, and that was Mission Impossible and Star Trek, which ironically are the 2 big jewels in the Paramount crown, which is amazing today.
And Leonard Nimoy's on both.
Mannix actually ran longer than either of the shows, if I remember correctly.
The number 3, they got in right at the end.
Yeah, you don't see the Mannix IP, do you, really?
No.
Interestingly. No,
Although, didn't they ask you guys to be the editor of the Mannix magazine?
yeah, but the picture rules for the licensed photography was terrible. No,
And that
so there
fight
you go.
over the Mannix.com domain
Yeah,
name was just sad.
So I think you can
Right.
only get mannix.org. So anyway, that's why I've singled out Lucille Ball, because also because there is that element. Yes, I mean Desilu. Yes, Toby, you've been more granular, and I completely accept that. But there's no denying culturally, we talk about cultural context and sort of socio-cultural significance, Lucille Ball being the reason Star Trek exists is a lovely, beautiful, only in Hollywood story. And I think that's what's so nice.
One of my wishes, which obviously never happened, is I wish Lucille Ball had appeared in an episode of the original series in some way, shape, or form.
One of Mudd's
Whether
women.
it was whether it was a walk-on, right? Whether it was a walk-on cameo behind the scenes or as a guest star.
Yeah.
And I always thought deep in my heart that somewhere along the line, the over-the-top performance by Majel Barrett
I was
early
just
on
gonna say,
was a little bit of a nod to Lucille Ball.
Well, Loxana how'd they tagline it as the Annie-Mame of the galaxy, and
Right.
Lucy had been
And
one of the
played Annie-Mame.
Yeah.
Look, all I know is if she'd been a Turnabout Intruder, different episode.
I'm just
So Tobes, you've already had your number one. Toby, you're number one.
Oh no, we're finishing.
Yeah, top that,
We're
Toads.
finishing with a really controversial one.
Woo! Who is it? Is it Brian Fuller?
the third guy from the left in the ninth scene of no.
Yeah. The first red
Well,
shirt.
It kind of refers back to
The Gorn.
to something that you said earlier.
Who? Who said?
In terms of ruling people out.
Who said it?
I think all three of you said it actually.
You just said that you said, and there's three of us here hanging. Well,
Well, I
who's
was-
he
I
talking
was-
to?
Pejorative you.
We are the Borg.
But it's very much an indirect take on what I say.
Oh, what the fuck is it? Get to it already! You're killing me.
Well, this person would definitely agree that it is them. It's
Oh
William
my God! You're still
It's William
milking it.
Shatner. It's William Shatner.
Oh, okay. Well, of course.
You know, I think he is the X factor that makes that show enjoyable. I think he was the right man in the right place.
I'm looking at Larry right now. I really wish we were a
Right.
video podcast.
Oh wait,
right
we're
now.
not.
Yeah.
I put these pants on for nothing. What?
I say he was the right man in the right place at the right time.
I would love to mock you, but I don't entirely disagree. Number one, no, but I get what you're saying. I hear where you're coming from.
I just don't think the show happens. You know, that the alternatives they had with Jeffrey Hunter, which didn't work out, and I think Jack Lord, right? I think he was one of the other actors that they were looking at putting into that role. I just can't see him in that role.
I just respect the fact that you're falling on your sword just to try and get Bill Shatner on the podcast before we release him.
But Kirk, I know it's the writing, and I know that he was just a jobbing actor. He just saw it as a paid gig. I get all that, but he is the reason why I watched the show. You know, it was Kirk and Spock. Those were the two that.
But that's why I can't single him out. That's why that genuinely, Toby's not being. That's the reason I
But
can't.
Spock is in the cage, and we've had our discussion about the cage and the difference with where No Man and where it fell for us. And for me, it is that affable, charismatic performance by Shatner, and the fact that the relationship that he builds with the crew. That's what won me over. That's what got me in there, and that's why I watched it. And I don't think I'm alone in that. But like I said, it's a controversial choice.
So we get. Does this mean we're going to give a nod to the toupee team as well then?
Toupee.
I'll cut that out.
Yeah.
Totally interesting choice, really worthy of debate.
Mm.
I hear your point. I respect it. So, you know, I like to joke and mess around. I again, I don't think he's number one on my list, but based on what you just said, I would put him on that giant list that I read off at the beginning as an important person.
Well, one thing that's really interesting to me is like I couldn't actually really track down how Shatner was selected. Like, presumably it was Roddenberry and you know, a joint decision with the producers. But I don't know how he was actually. I know he was doing well.
I'm not familiar with it, but he hasn't gone into that in any of his books.
I don't remember it in Star Trek Memories.
I mean, I did. I tried to research it as much as possible, and it just seemed to be that he sort of manifested, and Roddenberry. I don't know if Roddenberry knew his work from the theatre, or he was. Shatner was starting to make a name for himself as an actor.
Their casting.
Yeah.
I mean, you can talk about Bob Justman seeing Patrick Stewart at the Shakespeare Festival at UCLA.
Right, we
going,
don't
"There's
have that
Patrick."
story for Shatner.
Right,
You're absolutely right, Larry.
Mm.
Yeah, no, I'm not disagreeing. It's just one of those. For me, it's just one of those interesting dynamics.
It's your definition of saviour, I think.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right
because
at the beginning. It's define what
Yeah.
savior is and what. Yeah.
he's undoubted. I mean, and this is one of those the tensions though that has run it throughout Star Trek, because you suspect that Bill knows this, and other people associated with Star Trek sometimes have, you know, bridled at his response to that sense that he's one of the reasons that it does work, and he is undeniably one of the reasons. that it does work. I just find it. I think I'm probably less committed to this, ironically, since Chris Pine, because I was so worried about who would be cast as Kirk and that Kirk wouldn't work with anyone else in it. And that surprised me. And maybe that's changed my view slightly historically, that someone else could have played Kirk other than William Shatner. And I think that Nimoy and Kelly could well have found a similar chemistry with another leading.
You remember Kelly's not in the first few.
No, but in the overall.
But I'm talking about that very first, where no man has gone before. That episode specifically.
Although all you had to do with a pilot is sell it to some executives. You didn't have to appeal to a broad audience until you.
But the testing was important, And
right. But I mean, it's just the same. See, Star Trek to me was, as I look back at it now, was all. I mean, I enjoyed the cast; they're all great. Obviously, they bring. But to me, it was the world just.
I accept that.
Caught me,
and I
And then I loved the cast, and then I started noticing how everything was Kirk Spock, and I'm like, what about what? Scotty and McCoy or Chop Suey? What is the deal? And then that's where.
So I totally accept Gene and Dorothy were just hugely important. You mentioned Devil in the Dark. That was my favorite episode of the original series as well. So, I can't deny that the writing and the world building is hugely important.
Yeah.
So I'm not disagreeing with you. It's just when we were putting this list together, I was thinking of, why I loved the show and what got me into it. And I have to say it is Kirk and Spock and Bones.
Yeah.
And I say William Shatner will not disagree with that opinion at all.
So I'm just doing a preliminary research, and the closest thing I can see generally in terms of when he's asked, his answer is things like talent, and it's a very he gives himself agency. I think in the thing that he was working, he had a good reputation. He was asked to come in and read, or more specifically to see the cage, and then say, "Would you be interested?" I imagine it wasn't quite that way around in reality.
Well, I think it was. The question we're not getting the answer to is what somebody else saw in him.
Yes.
That put him on the list of prospects. I mean, the quote I have from him was, I was in New York doing some work. They called me and said, would you come see the first pilot with the idea of me being the second, with the idea of being the captain in the second pilot. I watched it and thought, oh my God, that's really good. Why didn't they buy it? The actors were a little ponderous, like the helmsman, turnabout, starboard. You've been out 5 years in the middle of space. Wouldn't you say, hey, George, turn left. There's a meteor coming. Well, get out of the way. So I added a little lightness. Then it's sold, and that's the answer. But again, it doesn't answer the question of why Shatner was hired.
So I watched.
I'm assuming it was Joe D'Agosta's casting list.
Well, this is the thing. I watched the whole. He was interviewed on stage for a convention a few years ago. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, it's on
YouTube.
Trek
and I watched
it.
It's Joseph D'Agosta, the casting director, and he talks about how he was brought onto the show for the second pilot, specifically for that. And he talks about how he found Nichelle, and that's the reason why she was cast. But he, in an hour-long interview, he doesn't mention anything about Shatner. Now that could be, some other reason for that. But I think if he had been the person who'd found Kirk, I think he would have mentioned it. So I'm still confused. I did do quite a lot of research. I watched quite a lot to try and find
it's interesting that none of us in various guises, in various functions across our professional lives, people would have turned to any of us to ask that question, and none of us have the answer.
But whoever did cast him, props.
They're the savior.
Yeah, well, casting, but also like thinking to put him on a list to begin with, then to make a decision. Yeah.
But I think it was a really short list from what I understand. I said I think Jack Lord, he was demanding like some kind of revenue or something like that.
Better sunglasses.
Yes, he wanted a piece of the action at the time.
Right.
And I think he wanted some creative control as well.
That is fascinating. Thank you. That was a very provocative
finale.
We've commented that we often agree too much, and so as the final part of this episode, I think that was a perfect note to end on. But as we do wrap up, this was a very, very interesting subject matter. So thank you, Larry, for bringing it to us.
It's one of those things that pops up and you think, well, what do, because people randomly pop up, Nick and Har for years, and then Michael Pillar for me, and not to elevate people over others, but to me, it's all about the pivot moment and where was the franchise, and if not this, what would the plan B have been? What would the road not taken have been? Which might just be a big black hole, or a black hole of we don't know what it might have been. So. Anyway.
Absolutely. Is there anything you'd like to plug or draw attention to at the moment as we wrap up?
Just, the Trek Files is my podcast on Roddenberry, my live stream on Tuesdays, Trekland Tuesdays Live. Portal 47, if you enjoy digging into people past and present, the behind-the-scenes people, which is kind of my bread and butter, I love, and want them to get their due. And the Trekland Treks day tours. And also that for the 60th, Terrace Cassidy and his company, Geek Nation Tours, we're doing the big multi-day Star Trek tour of location sites here the week before the Vegas convention. So if folks are interested in any of that stuff, it's
awesome.
Larry Nemecek on socials and LarryNemecek.com.
That's brilliant. So that was our choice of saviors. Obviously, we'd love to hear from you guys who you think the Star Trek saviors were. Are we right? Are we wrong? Is this new information for you? Who might the next Star Trek savior be? Does it need one? ? Possibly not. But as ever, thank you for joining us for this journey beyond the final frontier. And thanks to my colleagues Ian and Toby, and a special thank you to Larry for joining us.
Sure thing, guys. Thanks for having me. Trek well, you guys.
And peace, love, and logic, everybody.
Ta-ra a bit.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Final Frontier, a Star Trek podcast with Rich Matthews, Ian Spelling and Toby Weidman. If you want to get in contact with us, you can email us on beyondffpod@gmail.com or check us out on social media. You can even join our Patreon at BFF Beyond the Final Frontier. Huge thanks go out to Alex Weidman for the brilliant original music. Please search Alex Weidman Composer on YouTube to hear the full fantastic theme and more. Also thanks goes to award-winning voiceover artist Cissy Jones for our excellent opening monologue. Find out more about her incredible work at cissyjones.com. And of course, last but not least, our brilliant artwork comes from the designer Russell Seal. Discover more of his work on behance.net/Russell Seal. Thanks again and see you next episode, Beyond the Final Frontier.